The greatest canonization in history took place 400 years ago, on March 12, 1622, when Pope Gregory XV simultaneously recognized the sanctity of Isidore the Farmer, Francis Xavier, Ignatius of Loyola, Teresa of Avila, and Felipe Neri. The last four were important figures in the 16th century Catholic Reformation after the division caused by the Protestant Reformation in 1517. The saints of the Catholic Reformation, often called the Counter-Reformation, are not restricted to the saints of 1622. We can add other important figures, such as Francisco de Sales, who died in 1622, Joan of Chantal, Roberto Bellarmino, and Carlos Borromeo. Generally, saints walk in groups, as saintly people usually have saintly friends. That's how it should be. Jesus founded a church, an ecclesia, an assembly, so that we could not be disciples alone. Think about what happened in Poland last year. The country commemorated the 75th anniversary of the elevation to the cardinalate of the heroic Adam Sapieha, the episcopal consecration of Stefan Wyszynski, and the priestly ordination of Saint John Paul II. 1946 was a good year. Sapieha was a model and inspiration for the young Karol Wojtyla. Later, as Archbishop, Wojtyla would form a formidable partnership with Blessed Stephen, the primate of the millennium. We saw something similar in the 16th century. Teresa of Avila had a deep spiritual friendship with John of the Cross. It was a fascinating collaboration. John was Teresa's spiritual director, but it was she who led the Carmel reform. Francisco and Ignacio met when they were roommates when they were studying in Paris. Francisco already shared a room with Pedro Fabro and had somewhat mundane goals. Ignatius, much older than the two, later joined a small family and began to share his spiritual wisdom with them. This changed the court of Francisco and Pedro's lives. Both were canonized saints, a magnificent model of how friends can help other friends become saints. However, this does not mean that a saint must agree with other saints. Christians know this very well, for it is something that is part of the revealed Word of God. Moses and Aaron disagreed on some occasions, and Paul resisted Peter to the face in a well-known episode. Still, many are surprised when saints who live in more recent times come into conflict with one another. Peter and Paul were the first apostles of Rome. Philip Neri became known as the second apostle of Rome, and he too knew the holy conflict. Ignatius lived very close to Philip in Rome, but they went their separate ways. Ignatius, the former soldier, fought in an elite army made up of Catholic priests. For him, Philip Neri's happy picnics and pilgrimages were frivolous, if not foolish, to say the least. Philip, the second apostle of Rome, was wiser. The deep and seductive perversions of Rome would not be overcome by force, but converted by joy in penitence and candor in precepts. As St. John Henry Newman said of Philip Ignatius, at his Society of Diges, Philip proposed a convivium. A more rigorous character was Pope Pius V, one of the main personalities of the Catholic Reformation, known for having been the first head of the Inquisition, now Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, for having promulgated the Tridentine Mass and the Roman Catechism, for excommunicating Queen Elizabeth, and for rallying Christendom against the Turks at the Battle of Lepanto. Pius V was skeptical of Philip's actions and even restricted his ministry. It was a devastating threat to the person of Philip and to his entire pastoral project, which we today call the New Evangelization. In fact, Philip's church in Rome is still called Chiesa Nuova, New Church. More than 400 years after it was founded have been built. What would Philip do if the Pope was against him? He thought of going north and taking refuge in the Milan of San Carlos Borromeo, his great defender. In any case, Pius V only reigned for 6 years, therefore, Providence took care of Philip, since the Pope had the fate of all mortals. But think about it, Saint Charles was the main force behind Pius V's election to the papacy, and he was a staunch supporter of it. Charles was an ally of two saints who disagreed with each other, Philip and Pius V. In Philip's case, at no time did his veneration for Pius V diminish, despite the conflicts between the two. The same John Henry Newman, who would come to write that Philip, his spiritual father, was the saint of meekness and kindness, would also come to express sympathy for Pius V in a completely different register. Saint Pius V was serious and rigorous, as much as possible for a heart that burned and melted with divine love. But such energy and vigor were necessary for the time. He was a soldier of Christ in a time of insurrection and rebellion, when a state of siege was proclaimed, in a spiritual sense. Holy soldiers, radical reformers, difficult companions, fearless friends. These were the saints of 1622.